I woke up at 3 a.m. to my 15-year-old adopted daughter Maya, giggling on the phone in her room, but when I asked who she was talking to, she screamed, "No one," and turned bright red. I found a burner phone hidden in her drawer with messages from her birth parents who'd lost custody for neglect, coaching her through an elaborate 6-month plan to make me look mentally unstable. When I confronted her, she whispered, "Thanks for the 3 years of free room and board. My real parents say hi," while recording everything to use as evidence against me. I was fast asleep at 3 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of my 15-year-old adopted daughter Maya, giggling alone in her room. We'd taken her in 3 years ago from a group home after her birth parents lost custody, and hearing her happy usually made my heart swell, but something felt off. So the next morning, I asked who she was talking to. "No one," she blurted, her face going completely red, like she was angry at me for even asking. That's when I knew she was hiding something. Over the next few weeks, she spent every weekend at volunteer work, but would never let me drop her off. And there were cracks in her stories. She'd say she was at the animal shelter but come home smelling like perfume and cigarettes, or mention volunteers with names that changed each time. I tried everything to connect with her. We spent more evenings together. I'd share stories about trusting parents, how I loved her no matter what, but she'd just say, "I know, Mom," before going on her phone and ignoring me. Then came the expensive gifts, designer clothes, new electronics, jewelry she tried to hide. When I asked where they came from, she claimed they were donations to the shelter she got to take home, but these were $1,000 items. One evening I was putting laundry away when I found a burner phone hidden in her drawer. My hands shook as I opened it. The messages were from Mom and Dad with hearts. Photos showed Maya at restaurants, a nice house, shopping trips. My stomach dropped when I recognized them from old case files. The Murphys, her birth parents who'd lost custody for severe neglect and substance abuse. When Maya got home, I couldn't wait. I showed her the phone, kept my voice calm. "Honey, have they been contacting you?" She exploded. "They're my real parents. They're clean now. They have money. They want me back." I reminded her about finding her malnourished at 12, the substance den, the arrests. "People change," she screamed, then demanded privacy and locked her door. I stayed up all night researching. The Murphys shouldn't even know where we lived. This was a violation of the no contact order. The next morning, I called her social worker, who said she'd investigate immediately. I also called the school to make sure Maya was safe there. But when I went to wake Maya for school, her room was empty, window open, everything gone. I called 911 immediately, gave them the Murphys' information. Within hours, police found her at a luxury apartment downtown. They brought her home, but something was wrong. Maya was cold, different. She kept saying I was controlling and paranoid. The officer pulled me aside. The Murphys had already hired lawyers, were filing for restored custody, claiming I was an unfit parent who made false accusations. That night, Maya accidentally left her school laptop open. I saw an email tab and my blood went cold. Months of messages between Maya and someone named KM, Christina Murphy. They detailed a plan. Maya would act out, document my paranoid reactions, claim emotional abuse. In exchange, they were paying her $500 monthly, promising a car at 16, freedom to date, no rules. The emails showed coaching. "Remember, baby, she's not your real mom. Just pretend a little longer." I screenshotted everything with my phone, hands shaking. But when I tried to show Maya, she laughed. "Those are fake. I wrote them for a creative writing project about manipulation. Ms. Patterson can confirm it." She'd already thought of everything. The social worker arrived the next day for a wellness check. Maya had called them herself, claiming I was having delusions about her birth parents. As I tried to explain, showing the screenshots, Maya sat there looking small and scared, occasionally wiping away tears. The worker took notes about my fixation on the birth parents. That's when Maya's burner phone, the one I'd found and hidden as evidence, started ringing from my jacket pocket. The caller ID said, "Mom and Dad." Maya gasped. "She stole my friend Sarah's phone. She's pretending to be my birth parents." The social worker looked at me with deep concern. I realized too late. They'd given her the phone knowing I'd find it, knowing I'd look crazy. Everything had been a setup. The worker said she'd need to do a full investigation, that Maya might need to stay somewhere else temporarily for her safety. As they prepared to leave, Maya hugged me, whispering so only I could hear, "Thanks for the 3 years of free room and board. My real parents say hi." Then louder, trembling, "I still love you, Mom, even though you're sick." The social worker's pen scratched across her notepad as she documented my concerning behavior. I watched Maya's performance, the way she trembled just enough to seem genuine, how she'd glance at me with perfectly timed fear. 3 years of living with us, and I'd never seen this level of calculation. After they left, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the screenshots on my phone. The emails were real. I knew they were real, but Maya had already planted doubt. My husband would be home from his business trip tomorrow. I needed to figure this out before then. I drove to Maya's school and found Miss Patterson grading papers in her classroom. She looked up with a warm smile that faded when she saw my face. I explained about the creative writing project Maya mentioned, trying to keep my voice steady. Miss Patterson frowned and pulled up her assignment list. There was no creative writing project about manipulation, no assignment that would involve fake emails. She showed me Maya's recent work, all standard essays and book reports. My hands started shaking again. Back home, I searched Maya's room more thoroughly. Under her mattress, I found a notebook filled with her handwriting, lists of my daily routines, my reactions to different situations, notes about what made me upset or worried. One page had Operation Reunion written at the top with a timeline. According to her notes, they were in month 4 of a 6-month plan. The notebook also contained coaching notes. When she asks about your day, give vague answers. Make her push for details. Document her controlling behavior. Another entry, leave receipts for expensive items where she'll find them. When confronted, act defensive. Record if possible. I photographed every page, then put the notebook back exactly where I found it. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, a video file. I opened it to find footage of me searching Maya's room just now, taken from inside her closet. The message read, "Paranoid mother invades daughter's privacy. This will help our case." She'd been recording me. How many cameras were hidden in her room? How much evidence had she gathered? That evening, Maya came home acting perfectly normal, chatting about school and asking what was for dinner. I played along, chopping vegetables while she did homework at the kitchen table. When I accidentally dropped a knife, she was recording on her phone within seconds, capturing my shaking hands as I picked it up. I excused myself to the bathroom and called my sister. She listened as I whispered everything, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. It did sound crazy, a 15-year-old orchestrating an elaborate scheme with her birth parents. She suggested maybe I was stressed, that teenagers were naturally rebellious. Even my own sister didn't believe me. Over the next few days, I noticed more signs. Maya would have loud phone conversations about how worried she was about me, always when I was within earshot. She'd leave her door cracked just enough for me to hear her telling friends I'd been acting strange, checking her things, making accusations. I started documenting everything in a hidden journal, but I was careful. I'd learned she was watching me as much as I was watching her. I wrote in my car during lunch breaks, kept the journal at my office. One morning, I found Maya crying at the breakfast table. Real tears, or so they seemed. She showed me her phone. Someone had created a social media account in her name, posting terrible things about her classmates. The posts were dated over the past month, but the account had just been discovered by other students. Now she was being bullied, receiving harsh messages. I knew immediately she'd done this to herself. Another piece of evidence that I was failing to protect her, but I had to play the concerned mother. I called the school, demanded they investigate. The principal said they'd look into it, but mentioned Maya had already told them I'd been under a lot of stress lately, that I might have created the account myself. The trap was closing around me. Every move I made to protect myself or expose the truth was twisted into evidence of my instability. My husband called that night to say his trip was extended another week. When I begged him to come home, told him what was happening, he sounded worried about me. Maya had been texting him too, sharing her concerns about my mental state. I realized I was completely alone in this. The next day, Maya's performance escalated. She came home with a bruise on her arm, claimed she'd fallen at school because she was distracted, worried about the tension at home. But I'd seen her pressing a rubber band against her skin that morning, creating marks. When I didn't immediately rush to comfort her, she made sure to text photos to the social worker. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my home office, going through 3 years of photos, videos, memories of the scared 12-year-old we'd brought home. When had she changed? Or had this always been there, waiting? A notification popped up on my computer, an email to my work account. The subject line, concerned about your employee. It was from a worried parent, detailing how I'd been harassing a minor, making false accusations, showing signs of mental instability. Attached were photos of me following Maya to her volunteer work, screenshots of my frantic calls to the school, even a recording of me crying in my car after one of our confrontations. My job. She was going after my job now. I forwarded everything to my personal email, building my own evidence file. But I knew how it looked. A desperate woman grasping at straws, seeing conspiracies everywhere. Maya had crafted the perfect narrative, and I was playing right into it. The social worker called the next morning. She'd completed her initial assessment and had concerns about the home environment. She recommended family counseling and would be conducting regular check-ins. If things didn't improve, they might need to consider alternative arrangements for Maya's safety. I agreed to everything, knowing I had no choice. Fighting would only make me look worse. I had to be smarter than a 15-year-old who'd been planning this for months. That afternoon, while Maya was at school, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I went to the group home where we'd first met her. The director, Mrs. Chen, remembered me. We'd worked with her throughout the adoption process. I asked about Maya's time there, any behavioral issues they might not have disclosed. Mrs. Chen hesitated, then pulled out an old file. There had been incidents, manipulation of younger children, pitting staff members against each other, elaborate lies that were hard to disprove. But she'd been 12, traumatized, and they'd hoped a stable home would help. They'd minimized these issues in their reports to give her a chance at adoption. She showed me a note from Maya's file. Extremely intelligent, shows signs of reactive attachment disorder, may struggle with trust and exhibit controlling behaviors. Recommend close monitoring and professional support. We'd never seen this note. It had been removed from our copy of the file. I thanked Mrs. Chen and left with photos of the documents. Finally, some evidence that wasn't just my word against Maya's. I feel so sorry for this poor woman who's discovering all these hidden notes and manipulation tactics in Maya's room, and my heart just aches knowing she's being recorded and watched in her own home. The way Maya is turning everyone against her mom, even getting the sister and husband to doubt her, makes me want to cry because I can feel how alone and scared she must be feeling right now. But when I got to my car, my phone was buzzing with texts, photos of me at the group home, taken from across the street. The message, unstable mother desperately seeking dirt on innocent child. So sad. She'd followed me, or had someone else follow me. That evening, Maya was extra sweet. She helped with dinner, asked about my day, even suggested we watch a movie together. As we sat on the couch, she curled up next to me like she used to when she was younger. For a moment, I let myself hope this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Then I felt her slip something into my pocket. After she went to bed, I found a folded paper, a printed email from me to the Murphys, offering to sell Maya back to them for $50,000. The metadata showed it was sent from my work computer during lunch yesterday. She had access to my work email. She was creating evidence of me trafficking her. I burned the paper in the sink, knowing she probably had copies. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I was past fear now, moving into something colder and more determined. She might be 15 and brilliant, but I was her mother, even if she'd never accept that. And mothers protected their children, even from themselves. I started making my own plans. If she wanted to play chess, I'd play. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what I was up against. The Murphys were pulling her strings, but how deep did their influence go? Who else was involved? And most importantly, what was their endgame? Tomorrow, my husband would finally be home. I'd have one chance to convince him before Maya got to him with her version. One chance to save our family from the war being waged inside our own home. As I climbed into bed, I heard Maya on her burner phone, whispering excitedly about something happening next week. Phase 5, she called it. I pulled out my hidden journal and wrote down everything I could remember, preparing for whatever was coming. The real fight was just beginning. My husband arrived home the following afternoon while Maya was still at school. I met him at the door, pulled him into our bedroom, and showed him everything. The screenshots, the photos of Maya's notebook, the video of me searching her room. He sat on our bed, scrolling through it all with growing disbelief. I watched his face change from confusion to anger to something worse, doubt. He kept asking how a 15-year-old could orchestrate something so complex. I showed him the emails from Christina Murphy, the coaching instructions, the timeline. He studied each piece of evidence, but I could see him struggling to reconcile this with the daughter he thought he knew. Maya came home an hour later, dropped her backpack by the door, and froze when she saw us sitting together in the living room. Her eyes darted between us, calculating. Then her face crumpled into perfect devastation. She ran to my husband husband, threw her arms around him, and sobbed about how scared she'd been while he was gone, how I'd been acting strange, accusing her of terrible things, following her around. My husband held her but looked at me over her head. I saw the conflict in his eyes. Maya pulled back, wiped her tears, and asked if we could all talk together. She sat between us on the couch, holding both our hands, and launched into a performance that would have won awards. She admitted she'd been seeing her birth parents, but not because of some scheme, because she was curious about where she came from. She'd lied because she knew we'd be hurt. The expensive gifts? Her birth father had gotten a good job and wanted to make up for lost time. The emails about manipulation? She'd written them as a way to process her complicated feelings, like a diary. The hidden cameras? She'd bought one after feeling unsafe with my behavior lately. Every piece of evidence I had, she explained away with trembling lips and teary eyes. She even pulled out her phone and showed my husband texts she'd sent to friends, worried about my mental health. Dates matched up with incidents I'd documented, but her version painted me as unstable, not her as manipulative. My husband suggested we all take a break, think things through. Maya hugged us both and went to her room. As soon as her door closed, my husband turned to me with exhaustion in his eyes. He believed something was wrong, but he wasn't sure what. Maybe we all needed therapy. Maybe the stress of adoption was finally hitting us. Maybe Maya was acting out and I was overreacting. Maybe. That night, I lay awake beside him, knowing I was losing. Maya had anticipated every move, countered every piece of evidence. Tomorrow, she'd probably have new proof of my instability. I needed to change tactics. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the library. I researched everything I could about reactive attachment disorder, about children who manipulate, about parental alienation. I printed articles, took notes, built a timeline of Maya's behaviors over 3 years. Small things I'd dismissed before suddenly formed a pattern. I remembered her first year with us, how she'd convinced her teacher I was forcing her to do extra homework, when really she was staying up reading, how she'd told the neighbors we didn't feed her enough, then laughed it off as a misunderstanding when they brought groceries, how she'd pitted my husband and me against each other with small lies until we learned to verify everything with each other first. We'd thought she was testing boundaries, learning to trust. Now I saw it differently. She'd been practicing. I spent hours creating a detailed document, not of recent events, but of 3 years of subtle manipulations. Things that seemed innocent individually but formed a clear pattern together. I saved everything to a cloud account Maya didn't know about, then printed copies to hide in my car. When I got home, Maya was in the kitchen with my husband, baking cookies. She'd made his favorite kind. They were laughing together, and she was telling him about her day at school. Normal, perfect, exactly what he wanted to see. She smiled at me when I walked in, offered me a cookie. I took one, played along, but I noticed things. How she positioned herself to always keep my husband between us. How she touched her arm where the bruise was whenever he looked away. How she mentioned feeling dizzy but insisted she was fine. After dinner, the social worker called. She wanted to schedule a home visit for the next day. Maya, who was doing homework at the kitchen table, looked up with perfectly timed anxiety. My husband assured her everything would be fine. I stayed quiet, knowing anything I said would be used against me. That night, Maya knocked on our bedroom door. She stood there in her pajamas, looking young and vulnerable, and asked if she could talk to us. She climbed onto our bed, sitting cross-legged between us, and started crying. Real tears this time, but I'd learned those came easily to her. She said she was sorry for causing problems. She loved us. She didn't want our family to fall apart, but she was scared of me, of the way I'd been acting, of what might happen. She showed us her arm, where the bruise had darkened. She said she hadn't fallen at school. She'd bumped into the door frame running away from me when I'd tried to grab her phone. I hadn't touched her. I hadn't even been near her when she'd injured herself, but my husband hadn't been there. He had only her word against mine. Maya asked if maybe she could stay with her friend Sarah for a few days, just until things calmed down. My husband said we'd think about it. After she left, he turned to me with pain in his eyes. He asked if I'd grabbed her. I told him no. He believed me, but I could see doubt creeping in. The next morning, I woke up to find Maya already dressed and in the kitchen, preparing for the social worker's visit. She'd cleaned her room, done her homework, even made breakfast for everyone. The perfect daughter. I went to work, unable to concentrate. My boss called me into her office. She'd received concerning emails about my behavior, my mental state. She showed me the messages from concerned community members detailing my harassment of a minor, my paranoid delusions. The writing style was different from Maya's, more adult. The Murphys were getting involved directly now. My boss suggested I take some time off, get help. I agreed, knowing I had no choice. Another piece of my life Maya was systematically destroying. I left work early and sat in my car, thinking. I couldn't fight Maya on her terms. Every time I found evidence, she twisted it. Every time I tried to protect myself, she used it against me. I needed to do something unexpected. I drove to a small electronics store across town and bought a voice recorder. Not to catch Maya, she'd find it, but to record myself. Everything I did, everywhere I went, every interaction, my own alibi for whatever she planned next. When I got home, the social worker was already there. Maya was showing her around, pointing out family photos, talking about happy memories. She'd changed into a long-sleeved shirt to hide the bruise. Protecting me, she'd say if asked. The social worker interviewed each of us separately. Maya went first, spending an hour in her room with the door closed. I could only imagine what stories she was telling. My husband went next, and I heard his deep voice through the walls, though not the words. Then it was my turn. The social worker, Ms. Nathaniel, according to her badge, sat across from me with kind eyes and a neutral expression. She asked about our family dynamic, about Maya's adjustment, about recent stressors. I answered honestly but carefully, knowing Maya had probably predicted every response. Ms. Nathaniel asked about the emails, the birth parents, my concerns. I explained calmly, showed her the evidence I had. She took notes without comment. Then she asked about my mental health, my work situation, my support system. Maya had laid the groundwork well. After she left, Maya hugged me, whispered that she'd told Ms. Nathaniel how much she loved me, how worried she was about me, how she hoped I'd get help. My husband heard only the sweet words, not the threat underneath. That evening, I excused myself early, claiming a headache. In our bedroom, I turned on the voice recorder and slipped it into my pocket. From now on, I'd document every moment, but I needed more. I needed to make Maya feel safe enough to make a mistake. The next few days, I played the role Maya had cast me in, the concerned but slightly unstable mother. I forgot things, seemed distracted, cried at random moments. Maya watched me with satisfaction, reporting each incident to someone on her burner phone. My husband grew more worried. He suggested couples therapy, individual therapy, family therapy. I agreed to everything. Maya played the supportive daughter, holding my hand, telling me she loved me no matter what. But I was watching her too. I noticed she only called the Murphys when she thought I was asleep or in the shower. I timed her calls, always around 9 p.m. I noticed she did her real homework late at night, after maintaining her perfect daughter facade all day. I saw the exhaustion creeping in, the strain of keeping up her performance. On Thursday, I made my first move. I came home from my therapy appointment, really time spent at the library researching, acting dazed. I told Maya and my husband that the therapist had prescribed medication for anxiety. I showed them a med bottle filled with vitamins I'd transferred from another container. Maya's eyes lit up. Medication would explain erratic behavior, make me an unreliable witness. She immediately texted someone, probably documenting this new development. That night, I accidentally took too many pills. Nothing dangerous, just vitamins, but I acted confused, dizzy. Commentary starts. Oh, this is so heartbreaking watching this mom have to pretend to be unstable just to protect herself from Maya's lies, and I can feel how much it must hurt her to see her husband starting to doubt her when she's telling the truth about not hurting Maya, while Maya sits there crying fake tears and making up stories about running away from her mom when really she hurt herself on purpose. And now this poor woman has to carry a voice recorder everywhere just to prove she's not doing the terrible things Maya keeps accusing her. Commentary ends here. Maya called my husband in panic. Real or performed, I couldn't tell. She suggested calling 911. I refused, said I just needed to sleep. She made sure to document everything. The next morning, I acted foggy, confused about the night before. Maya watched me like a hawk, waiting for more ammunition. I gave her small things, putting milk in the cabinet, calling her by the wrong name once, staring into space during breakfast. My husband took the day off work to watch me. Maya went to school reluctantly, but not before setting up her laptop to record in the living room. I found the camera later, pretended not to notice. That afternoon, while my husband was in the bathroom, I quickly checked Maya's laptop. She'd been careless, left her email open. A new message from KM, Phase 5 tonight. He'll be there at 8. Make sure she's alone. Someone was coming to the house. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. Who was coming? What was Phase 5? I had 4 hours to prepare. I told my husband I needed to lie down, the medication making me tired. In our room, I called my sister, asked her to come over for dinner. Then I called my brother, 2 neighbors, anyone I could think of. If Maya wanted me alone at 8, I'd make sure I wasn't. My husband was confused by the sudden dinner party, but went along with it. Maya came home to find our house full of people. Her face went through several expressions before settling on pleased. The perfect daughter, happy to see family. But I caught her checking her phone repeatedly. Saw her jaw tighten when 8 p.m. came and went. Whatever Phase 5 was, I'd disrupted it. The next few days passed in a tense stance. Maya tried new tactics, leaving her diary where I'd find it, full of entries about her fear and sadness, telling my husband she'd heard me on the phone with someone, saying things that didn't make sense, creating a false trail of my deteriorating mental state. I continued my own documentation, recording everything, building my file, but I was running out of time. The social worker had scheduled another visit. My boss was pressuring me to take extended leave. My husband looked at me with increasing concern. Then Maya made her first real mistake. I'd been pretending to take my medication regularly, acting increasingly foggy. Maya grew confident, careless. One afternoon, she left her burner phone on the kitchen counter while she went to the bathroom. I grabbed it, quickly forwarding several messages to my email before putting it back. The messages were damning, not just from the Murphys, but from someone else. Dr. Vita, who was coaching Maya on psychological manipulation, teaching her terms like gaslighting and projection to use against me. The messages detailed payment, $2,000 already transferred, another $3,000 when Maya was returned to the Murphys. But when I checked my email later, the messages weren't there. Maya had somehow blocked them from sending or deleted them remotely. She'd been testing me, and I'd failed. That night, she performed her biggest show yet. At dinner, she started shaking, said she felt unsafe. She showed my husband marks on her wrist, scratches she'd made herself but blamed on me grabbing her. She cried about finding strange notes in her backpack, threatening messages she said were in my handwriting. My husband examined the notes. They were disturbing. Threats to send her back to the group home, to hurt her if she didn't behave. The handwriting looked like mine but wasn't. Maya had been practicing. He asked me directly if I'd written them. I said no. He believed me, but barely. Maya sobbed harder, begged to stay with Sarah for just one night. Just one night where she could feel safe. My husband agreed. As Maya packed a bag, she hugged me goodbye, whispered in my ear that Phase 6 was coming, that I should enjoy my last week as a mother. After she left, I broke down. Not the performance Maya expected, but real exhaustion. My husband held me, promised we'd figure this out, but I could feel him pulling away, unsure what to believe. I spent the night transcribing my voice recordings, organizing my evidence. The pattern was clear to me, but would anyone else see it? Maya had created too much doubt, too many alternative explanations. The next morning, Mrs. Chen from the group home called. She was worried, had been thinking about my visit. She wanted to meet, had something to show me. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop that afternoon. I arrived early, chose a corner table. Mrs. Chen came in carrying a box. Inside were files, videos, recordings from Maya's time at the group home. Things they'd kept but never reported, not wanting to damage her chances at adoption. The videos showed a younger Maya, but the same calculated behavior, convincing younger children to lie about staff members, creating elaborate stories about abuse that investigations proved false, manipulating room assignments to isolate certain kids. One recording stood out. Maya, at 12, talking to another child, explaining how adults were easy to fool, how you just had to cry at the right times, say the right words, how she'd get out soon, find a rich family, then get her real parents back. She'd been planning this for 3 years. Mrs. Chen apologized for not warning us properly. She'd hoped Maya would change, that love would be enough. She gave me copies of everything, said she'd testify if needed. I drove home with the box beside me, finally having proof that couldn't be explained away. But as I pulled into our driveway, I saw cars I didn't recognize. My husband's car was there too, though he should have been at work. Inside, I found my husband, Maya, the social worker, and 2 people I recognized from photos, the Murphys. They all turned when I walked in. Maya was crying, her face buried in Christina Murphy's shoulder. My husband's face was stone. He told me Maya had called from Sarah's house, hysterical. Said I'd been sending her threatening texts all night. He showed me his phone. Dozens of messages from my number to Maya's. Terrible things I'd never written. The Murphys had driven up immediately, concerned for their daughter's safety. The social worker had determined an emergency evaluation was necessary. They were discussing temporary placement options. I tried to explain, to show them the box from Mrs. Chen, but Maya became hysterical when she saw it, screaming that I was trying to turn everyone against her, that I'd probably faked whatever was in there. The social worker had to calm her down, while the Murphys comforted their baby. My husband asked me to step outside with him. On our porch, he looked broken. He said he didn't know what was real anymore. The texts had come from my phone. He checked. Maya was terrified. The Murphys seemed reasonable, and I seemed increasingly unstable. He suggested I stay with my sister for a few days, let things calm down, get some help, figure out why I was doing this. I wanted to scream, to rage, to make him see, but I saw Maya watching through the window, waiting for me to explode. So I nodded, agreed, went inside to pack a bag. As I passed Maya, she mouthed 2 words, "You lose," but she was wrong, because in my pocket, the voice recorder was still running, and it had caught something Maya didn't know about. Christina Murphy, whispering to her husband when they thought no one could hear, coaching Maya on what to say next. I drove to my sister's house with the box beside me and plans forming in my mind. Maya thought she'd won. The Murphys thought they'd gotten away with it. Even my husband thought this was over. They were all wrong. The real fight hadn't even started yet. My sister listened to the recordings that night, watched the videos, read the files. For the first time, someone believed me completely. We stayed up until dawn, planning. If Maya wanted to play chess, she'd forgotten one thing. Sometimes the best move is to let your opponent think they're winning. Over the next 3 days, I played my part perfectly. I checked myself into an outpatient program, started therapy, took medication. I sent my husband supportive texts, told him I wanted to get better for our family. I even sent Maya an apology, saying I was getting help. Meanwhile, my sister was busy. She reached out to other families who'd fostered Maya briefly before she came to us, found similar stories, similar patterns. She tracked down the mysterious doctor, Vida, not a real doctor, but the Murphys' friend who'd been coaching Maya for months. We built a case, quietly and carefully, not just of recent events, but of a pattern going back years, of birth parents who'd never accepted losing custody, who'd groomed their daughter to destroy any family who took her in. On the 4th day, the social worker called. She wanted to meet with me, discuss next steps. The Murphys were pushing for immediate custody transfer, citing my mental health issues. Maya was supporting their petition, saying she felt unsafe with me. I agreed to meet, suggested a neutral location. The social worker agreed, probably relieved I was being cooperative. We set the meeting for the next afternoon. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow would determine everything. If I played this wrong, I'd lose my daughter forever. Not to the Murphys, but to the narrative she'd created. If I played it right, maybe I could save her from herself. I thought about the scared 12-year-old we'd brought home 3 years ago. Somewhere inside Maya, that child still existed. Hurt, abandoned, convinced that love was just another transaction. The Murphys had taken that pain and weaponized it, turned their daughter into a tool for their own agenda. The meeting was at 2 p.m. I arrived early with my sister and a box of evidence. Real evidence this time, not the manufactured kind Maya specialized in. The social worker arrived right on time, professional but wary. I didn't start with accusations or defenses. Instead, I showed her the videos from the group home. Let her see 12-year-old Maya explaining her manipulation tactics. Showed her the statements from other foster families, the evidence of the Murphys' involvement going back months. Ms. Nathaniel watched everything carefully, taking notes. Her expression shifted from skepticism to concern to something like anger. When I showed her the recording of Christina Murphy coaching Maya during their visit to our house, she set down her pen. She asked for copies of everything, said she needed to review it all, consult with her supervisor. The emergency custody petition would be put on hold pending investigation. She also wanted to speak with Mrs. Chen, the other foster families, everyone involved. As she prepared to leave, she paused, told me she'd seen cases like this before. Parents who couldn't let go, who used their children as weapons. Said Maya was as much a victim as anyone else. I knew she was right. Maya wasn't evil. She was a damaged child being exploited by the people who should protect her. But knowing that didn't make living through her campaign of destruction any easier. I went home that night for the first time in days. My husband was there, alone. Maya was still at Sarah's house, or so he thought. We sat at our kitchen table, and I showed him everything. The recordings, the videos, the evidence I'd gathered. He cried. For Maya, for us, for the family we'd tried to build. He apologized for doubting me, for not seeing what was happening. But I understood. Maya had been brilliant in her manipulation. She'd known exactly which buttons to push, which fears to exploit. We talked until sunrise, planning our next moves. The social worker would investigate, but that would take time. Meanwhile, Maya and the Murphys would escalate, try to force a quick resolution. We had to be ready. The next day brought a new crisis. My boss called. She'd received more emails, now with attachments. The way she's staying calm and playing along while secretly building her case shows such strength, even though inside she must be falling apart knowing Maya is out there still plotting against her. Photos that looked like me in compromising situations, documents suggesting I'd been stealing from the company, all fake but sophisticated enough to require investigation. I drove to the office, met with HR, provided alibis for every alleged incident, but the damage was done. Even cleared of wrongdoing, the suspicion would linger. Another piece of my life Maya had successfully poisoned. That afternoon, Sarah's mother called my husband. She was confused. Maya had told her she was going home that morning, but we hadn't seen her. My husband called Maya's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic set in. Where was she? Had she run away again? Were the Murphys hiding her? Then Maya walked through our front door, acting surprised to see us both home. She'd been at the library, she said, working on a school project. Her phone had died. She was sorry for worrying us, but something was different. Her confidence seemed shaken. She kept checking her phone, looking out windows. During dinner, she barely touched her food, lost in thought. That night, I heard her on her burner phone, voice tense. The call was short, ended with Maya throwing the phone against her wall. Through the thin walls, I heard her crying. Not the performed sobs I'd grown used to, but something rawer. The next morning, she was back in character, the perfect daughter, helpful and sweet. But I caught moments where the mask slipped. A flash of fear when a car drove by. A flinch when her phone buzzed. Something had changed in the game, and Maya was no longer sure she was winning. The social worker worker called that afternoon. She'd verified much of what I'd shown her. The investigation was expanding. She wanted to interview Maya again, this time with a specialist in childhood manipulation present. When I told Maya about the appointment, her face went white. She excused herself, and I heard her desperately calling someone on her burner phone. The call lasted less than a minute. That evening, Maya made her final play. At dinner, she announced she wanted to speak to us both. She confessed everything, but with a twist. Yes, she'd been in contact with her birth parents. Yes, she'd lied and manipulated, but only because they'd threatened her. Threatened to hurt us if she didn't cooperate. She'd been protecting us all along. She showed us texts on her burner phone, threats from the Murphys, demands that she destroy our family or face consequences. The messages were dated weeks ago, painting her as a victim forced into terrible actions. My husband looked devastated. I studied the messages, noting the timestamps, the language. Maya watched me nervously as I scrolled through them. Then I smiled, because Maya had finally made a fatal error. The threatening messages used phrases from the coaching emails I'd seen, word for word, phrases that only existed in messages she claimed I'd never seen, that had been blocked from sending to my email. She'd created these fake threats using content she didn't know I'd photographed. I set down the phone carefully and looked at my daughter, our daughter. For the first time in weeks, I saw her. Not the performer, not the manipulator, but the scared 15-year-old who'd been convinced that love was conditional and family was temporary. The game was over. Tomorrow, the specialist would see through her stories. The investigation would reveal the truth. The Murphys would face consequences for their actions, and Maya would have to face the reality of what she'd done. But tonight, she was still our daughter. Still the child we'd promised to love no matter what. The war was ending, but the real work, healing our family, was just beginning. As Maya realized her final gambit had failed, her carefully constructed facade finally cracked, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine emotion in her eyes. Not performed tears or calculated fear, but real, overwhelming terror at the possibility that she'd destroyed the only real family she'd ever had. The silence stretched between us as Maya stared at the burner phone in my hands. Her eyes darted from the screen to my face, calculating, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. My husband looked between us, confusion giving way to understanding as he processed what had just happened. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. She stood abruptly, knocking over her water glass. The liquid spread across the table as she backed toward the stairs. My husband moved to block her path, not aggressively, just positioning himself between her and her room. For the first time in months, Maya had no script to follow, no coached response, no performance prepared. She stood there, 15 years old and exposed, her elaborate scheme unraveling with each passing second. I cleaned up the spilled water while my husband guided Maya back to her chair. She sat rigid, arms crossed, jaw clenched. The mask had slipped, but she wasn't ready to let it fall completely. Not yet. That night, none of us slept. Maya barricaded herself in her room, pushing furniture against the door. We heard her pacing, talking on her burner phone in urgent whispers. By morning, the calls had stopped. When I passed her door, I heard only silence. The specialist arrived at 10 the next morning. Mr. Nathaniel had arranged for someone experienced in cases of parental alienation and child manipulation. The woman who entered our home moved with quiet confidence, carrying a briefcase and wearing glasses that seemed to miss nothing. Maya emerged from her room dressed perfectly, hair brushed, makeup subtle, the performer preparing for her most important show, but something was different. The confidence that had carried her through months of deception flickered like a dying bulb. The specialist set up in our living room, arranging chairs in a specific configuration. She placed a recorder on the coffee table, explaining that everything would be documented for the investigation. Maya's eyes fixed on the device, her breathing shallow. I watched from the kitchen as the interview began. The specialist's approach was unlike anything Maya had prepared for. No emotional appeals, no opportunities for tears or manipulation, just careful, methodical questions that built on each other like blocks in a tower. Maya started strong, sticking to her latest story about being threatened by her birth parents. But the specialist had reviewed everything. The emails, the videos from the group home, the pattern of behavior across multiple families. She asked about specific phrases, particular dates, small details that only someone who'd studied the full picture would know. Within 20 minutes, Maya's story began to fracture. She contradicted herself, then tried to backtrack. The specialist simply nodded, made notes, moved to the next question. No judgment, no emotion, just relentless, professional pursuit of truth. My husband sat beside me as we watched our daughter's elaborate construction collapse. Maya's voice grew higher, more desperate. She tried tears, but the specialist handed her tissues and continued. She claimed memory problems, but the specialist referenced her earlier perfect recall of other events. Then the specialist produced printed copies of the coaching emails, the ones Maya claimed she'd never seen. She asked Maya to explain specific phrases that appeared in both the coaching messages and the threatening texts she'd shown us last night. Maya's face drained of color. The interview lasted 3 hours. By the end, Maya sat slumped in her chair, all pretense abandoned. The specialist thanked her, packed up her materials, and asked to speak with my husband and me privately. In our kitchen, she explained what would happen next. The investigation would expand. The Murphys would be interviewed, their friend, Dr. Vita, located. The custody petition would be dismissed. Criminal charges might be filed for custodial interference and corruption of a minor, but her main concern was Maya. Reactive attachment disorder combined with active parental manipulation had created a perfect storm. Maya needed intensive therapy, possibly residential treatment. The patterns were too ingrained for simple outpatient care. After the specialist left, we found Maya in her room, systematically destroying evidence, ripping pages from notebooks, deleting files from her laptop, breaking the burner phone into pieces. We didn't stop her. The investigation had what it needed. She looked up when we entered, mascara streaking her cheeks. For a moment, I saw the 12-year-old we'd brought home, terrified and alone. Then the moment passed, and she turned back to her destruction. The next days blurred together. The social worker returned with court orders. The Murphys were located at a motel 2 towns over, arrested for violating the no-contact order and interfering with custody. Their friend, who'd been posing as Dr. Vita, faced charges for practicing psychology without a license. Maya was placed on a psychiatric hold for evaluation. The drive to the facility was silent except for her occasional sniffles. She'd packed a small bag, folded her clothes with mechanical precision. At the intake desk, she turned to us one last time. No words, just a look that held 3 years of complicated history. The facility specialized in adolescents with attachment disorders. The walls were painted soft colors, the staff trained in trauma-informed care. Maya's room was simple but comfortable. She'd share it with another girl who'd been there 6 months already. We visited every day at first. Maya refused to see us for the first week, then allowed brief supervised visits. She sat across from us in the common room, picking at her sleeves, answering questions in monosyllables. The therapist said this was normal. Trust had to be rebuilt from nothing. My husband took family medical leave. We attended our own therapy sessions, learning about trauma bonding, manipulation tactics, healthy boundaries. The therapist helped us understand how Maya's early experiences had shaped her worldview, how the Murphys had exploited that damage. 2 weeks into treatment, Maya had her first breakthrough. During a group session, she'd broken down completely, admitting to another patient how exhausted she was from maintaining her false persona. The therapist called it a crack in the armor, not healing yet, but the possibility of it. The investigation continued without us. Mrs. Chen testified about Maya's history at the group home. Other foster families came forward with similar stories. A pattern emerged of the Murphys tracking down each placement, attempting contact, being rebuffed until they found Maya's vulnerability, her desperate need for belonging. My job situation resolved quietly. Once the full story emerged, HR dismissed the false complaints. My boss apologized, offered me paid leave to focus on family. I returned part-time, grateful for the normalcy of spreadsheets and meetings. Maya's treatment stretched from weeks to months. Slowly, painfully, she began to engage with therapy. Family sessions started in month 2. The first one was a disaster. Maya screaming accusations, us trying not to react, the therapist calmly redirecting. But we persisted. She told us things during those sessions that explained so much. How the Murphys had first contacted her through a classmate's social media. How they'd convinced her that every family who'd taken her in had done it for money. That only biological connection meant real love. How they'd taught her to document everything. To always have evidence against anyone who might hurt her. The breakthrough came in month 3. During a particularly intense session, Maya suddenly stopped mid-accusation. She looked at us, really looked at us, and asked why we kept coming back. Why, after everything she'd done, we still showed up every week. My husband's answer was simple. I'm getting chills at this moment when Maya finally asks why they keep coming back after everything she's done to hurt them, and her dad is about to answer her. This feels like such an important turning point where Maya might actually start to believe that someone could love her without wanting something from her, because she was our daughter, not by blood, but by choice. And that choice wasn't conditional on her being perfect or grateful or easy, it just was. Maya cried then. Not the performed tears we'd seen so many times, but raw, ugly sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. The therapist let her cry, let us hold her when she finally reached for us. Recovery wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments when the old patterns reasserted themselves. Maya would test us, push boundaries, revert to manipulation when stressed, but now we recognized it, could name it, could work through it together. The Murphys were sentenced to 2 years for custodial interference. They were also ordered to have no contact with Maya until she turned 21, and then only if she initiated it. Their friend received probation and community service. Maya didn't attend the sentencing. She was in art therapy that day, painting her feelings instead of performing them. After 6 months, Maya transitioned to outpatient treatment. Coming home was terrifying for all of us. We'd modified her room, removing the hidden cameras together, repainting the walls a color she chose. She stood in the doorway for a long time before entering. The first weeks were awkward. We danced around each other, unsure how to be a family without the elaborate performances. Maya started at a new school, one that specialized in students with emotional challenges. She made no friends at first, too scared to trust, too tired to perform. Gradually, routine emerged. Therapy twice a week. Family dinners where we practiced honest communication. And homework at the kitchen table where I could help without hovering. Small moments of genuine connection between the careful distances. Maya's 18th birthday approached with mixed emotions. In her original plan, this would have been when she returned to the Murphys, claimed her inheritance of destruction. Instead, she was learning to paint, discovering she had real talent when she wasn't focused on manipulation. The group home invited us to speak at their annual training. Maya surprised us by wanting to participate. She stood before a room of social workers and foster parents, voice shaking, and told them what to watch for, how to spot the signs, how to intervene before a child got lost in their own elaborate defenses. Some days were harder than others. Maya would retreat into herself, or we'd catch her collecting evidence out of habit, but she'd stop when we named it. Take a breath. Try again. The therapist called it practicing humanity, learning to be real in a world that had taught her to be false. My sister became Maya's unofficial mentor, someone safe to practice relationships with. They'd get coffee weekly, Maya slowly learning to have conversations without agenda, to share without calculating impact. One evening, almost a year after everything began, I found Maya in the kitchen making dinner. She'd followed a recipe from my grandmother's cookbook, the one I'd tried to share with her years ago. The lasagna was slightly burned, the salad overdressed, but she'd made it without prompting, without performance. We ate together, the 3 of us, talking about ordinary things, school projects, weekend plans, a movie we might watch. Maya laughed at something my husband said, not the calculated giggle from before, but a surprise snort that made her cover her mouth in embarrassment. That night, as I passed her room, I heard her on the phone with a classmate, making actual plans for a study group. No ulterior motives, no documentation, just a teenager navigating the complex world of genuine human connection. The war was over. The healing continued. Our family, scarred but surviving, moved forward one honest day at a time. Dude, watching Maya make that burned lasagna from the grandmother's cookbook just fills my heart with so much hope and joy because she's finally learning to do things just because she wants to, not to trick anyone. And that real laugh she let out instead of her fake giggle shows she's discovering who she really is underneath all those walls she built to protect herself. This whole story has been nice, bro.